Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for coming to class. We're doing Mark chapter 12 today. So to get our minds ready for today's lesson, let's go to the video.
Coffee every day didn't work for me, but I couldn't figure out.
Good biblical message here, guys.
123.
And he began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard and put a fence around it, and dug a pit with winepress, built a tower, and leased it to tenants, and went into another country. When the season came, he sent a servant to the tenants to get from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. And they took him and beat him and sent him away empty-handed. Again he sent to them another servant, and they struck him on the head and treated him shamefully. And he sent another, and him they killed. And so with many others, some they beat and some they killed. He had still one other, a beloved son. Finally he sent him to them, saying, "They will respect my son." But those tenants said to one another, "This is the heir. Come, let us kill him. The inheritance will be ours." And they took him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. What will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the tenants and give the vineyard to others. Have you not read this scripture? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. And they were seeking to arrest him, but feared the people, for they perceived that he had told the parable against them. So they left him and went away. And they sent to him some of the Pharisees and some of the Herodians to trap him in his talk. And they came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are true and do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not?" But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, "Why put me to the test? Bring me a denarius, and let me look at it." And they brought one, and he said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" They said to him, "Caesar's." Jesus said to them, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they marveled at him. And Sadducees came to him, who say that there is no resurrection. And they asked him a question, saying, "Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife, but leaves no child, the man must take the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. There were 7 brothers. The first took a wife, and when he died, left no offspring. And the second took her and died, leaving no offspring, and the third likewise. And the 7 left no offspring. Last of all, the woman also died. In the resurrection, when they rise again, whose wife will she be? For the seven had her as wife. Jesus said to them, Is this not the reason you are wrong, because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God? For when they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the dead being raised, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the passage about the bush, how God spoke to him, saying, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not God of the dead, but of the living. You are quite wrong. And one of the scribes came up and heard them disputing with one another, and seeing that he answered them well, asked him, Which commandment is the most important of all? Jesus answered, The most important is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. And the scribe said to him, You are right, teacher. You have truly said that he is one, and there is no other besides him. And to love him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, and with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself, is much more than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he answered wisely, he said to him, You are not far from the kingdom of God. And after that, no one dared to ask him any more questions. And as Jesus taught in the temple, he said, How can the scribes say that the Christ is the son of David? David himself in the Holy Spirit declared, The Lord said to my Lord, Sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. David himself calls him Lord. So how is he his son? And the great throng heard him gladly. And in his teaching he said, Beware of the scribes, who like to walk around in long robes, and like greetings in the marketplaces, and have the best seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at feasts, who devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation. And he sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box. Many rich people put in large sums. And the poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. For they all contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on.
Alright, so let's get into our reading. Mark chapter 12, verses 1 through 12. And he began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard and put a wall around it, and dug a vat under the winepress and built a tower, and rented it out to vine growers and went on a journey. At the harvest time, he sent a slave to the vine growers in order to receive some of the produce of the vineyard from the vine growers. They took him and they beat him and sent him away empty-handed. Again, he sent them another slave, and they wounded him in the head and treated him shamefully. And sent another, and that one they killed. And so with many others, beating some and killing others. He had one more to send, a beloved son. He sent him last of all to them, saying, They will respect my son. But those vine growers said to one another, This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. They took him and they killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. What will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the vine growers and will give the vineyard to others. Have you not even read this scripture? The stone which the builders rejected, this became the chief cornerstone. This came about from the Lord, and it was marvelous in our eyes. And they were seeking to seize him, yet they feared the people, for they understood that he spoke the parable against them. And so they left him and went away. So who is the man that planted the vineyard in this parable? Who does the man represent?
Is it God?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Who are the vine growers? In this particular parable, it's the religious leaders. Who are the slaves?
Prophets.
Yes, prophets and priests who remained faithful. The Son is Jesus, and the others represent the Gentiles. Jesus can really paint a picture, can't he? Jesus exposed the religious leaders' plans in a parable that everyone could understand. I could only imagine that this was their true reaction.
So what you're saying, or what the scripture's saying, is the people that the owner of the property, okay, he sent delegates. Those were the prophets.
Yeah. It's almost like he's recounting history in a couple sentences.
And so they did all those things to the prophets, and he said that several times,
Mm.
and sometimes directly.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting story. I didn't understand it at first. Took a couple reads, and then I'm like, wow, I just really went there.
But didn't he make a prophecy about himself?
Mhm.
Because they sent the son.
Sent the son, and he died. Another one, disciples. But is anything else about this passage stick out to you? What Jesus says, whether it's him telling the religious leaders that he is the stone that the builders rejected, or something else? Is there anything else you guys get from this text?
Well, the only thing that comes to my mind is with Peter's confession, Jesus said that on this rock I will build my church. And I think, was that in the Greek, is that a proper, when he said on this rock? Peter was Petros. And Christ said, but on this rock I will build my church, and he was referring to the truth that Jesus Christ is the Son of God.
A confession of that truth.
But when he says the stone that the builders rejected, would he be referring to that? Maybe?
Perhaps, I don't know.
Brad, you kind of looked up there.
I
I
was
don't know if you had a
listening.
thought.
I was listening to Joe.
Oh.
I think it's interesting how, you said you read it a couple times, and was the second time just now when you had read it versus the video where I was like, oh yeah, that's God, all that stuff. They seem to understand it. It said in the first 12, they're like, oh, that's against us.
I figure about halfway through, they're like, hey, wait a second here. think he's making fun of us. What's going on here?
But
Yeah,
it
they
didn't
could-
change their ways.
Let's get
The
on this.
fact that, Jesus is represented as the stone, and they were throwing stones at these people. It may be a correlation between the two.
And one thing we need to remember, when it's a parable, doesn't mean it's a true story. It just means it's a story that illustrates something. And a lot of times we wanna take them for face value, and we can't, because they're a story.
Right. Yeah, David.
Two things that stand out was, one, Jesus revealing himself as the cornerstone, as the son in the parable. And then the other thing is the prophecy. What will the owner of the vineyard do in response to them killing the son? We know what he did in history, where he allowed Rome to come in and destroy Jerusalem and slay a lot of people for rejecting and killing the son.
Right?
Then give the vineyard to others,
Who are the others?
the Gentiles. Because the Jews were under the impersonation, hey, this is ours, this is all ours. Just like the old law was theirs. He's gonna now give it to the Gentiles. And Peter's sermon on Pentecost, the promise is for you and to others that are far off. What was the other one? There are other sheep. One of the parables. Yeah, there are other. I am a good shepherd, but there are other sheep besides, and he's referring to the Gentiles.
Before we continue on, I want to apologize because the printer was not acting in my favor this morning, so that's why you don't have any worksheets. So it kept saying, I forget what the message was. Larry took a look at it. I ran out of time, so maybe we'll get that to you next week. Let's move on to Mark chapter 12, verse 13 through 17. Then they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to him in order to trap him in his statement. They came to him and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are truthful and defer to no one. You are not partial to any, but teach the way of God in truth. Is it lawful to pay a poll tax to Caesar or not? Shall we pay or shall we not pay?" But he, knowing their hypocrisy, said to them, "Why are you testing me? Bring me a denarius and to look at." They brought him one. And he said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" And they said to him, "Caesar's." And Jesus said to them, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they were amazed at him. They were just everywhere in this chapter, weren't they? Just one right after another. You couldn't get out of the city without talking to at least 15 of them. But why did they ask Jesus about taxes? So they're like, well, let's throw a trick question at him. We're gonna really stump him this time. Because if he would have said yes, that means he supports Rome. If he says no, he committed treason. Got him, guys. Got him. But he doesn't. He says, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and God the things that are God. And just that video, just how angry they were. It's like, I don't know why.
But that's a lesson for today.
Yeah. No matter what these leaders did, they couldn't stump Jesus, and it's very evident in the rest of this chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's so cool about Jesus' interaction. I mean, he meets them head on. He does. He just.
I like how they know he's frustrated. When they write of him, we can tell he's frustrated. But he doesn't seem to raise his voice. He just tells it how it is. That's always the amazing thing. Unless, of course, they're trying to gamble in the temple. But even then, it did, it was a controlled anger.
Well, even with last week with their confrontation about his question of what authority do you do these things? And this is after he flipped over all the money changers and everything else and cleared the temple. That's why they went after him. Who gave you this authority? He met him head on. Didn't raise his voice, didn't feel threatened. He just said, okay, I'll ask you a question first.
Right.
And we see that with the dramatic depiction, we see that. And I like the way he did, I like the way the actor did the coin. He did, who's in scripture?
Well, every time when we get that mad, how long does it take for us to just like calm down? Okay, let's have a normal conversation. He was just.
He was right on it, yeah.
Yeah. He was
But
like, I
you
got
don't
that out of my
feel-
system. Let's go.
You don't feel threatened. You don't feel like somebody's making a frontal attack, and they were actually doing that. But it's the way they asked the questions, and he was able to discern. Hey, they're trying to trip me up. So he says, "What are you doing? What are you putting me to the test for?"
Well, he had nothing else going on that day, I suppose. Any other thoughts?
As evil as they were, he was still trying to save their soul. He was still
Yes.
trying
Yes.
to
Very much
show
so.
them the error of their way.
He was teaching them the entire time.
The depiction of what we're going to read now was when the Sadducee went up to him, and one of the apostles was trying to push him away, and Jesus actually reached out and touched that individual who was going to ask him. He says, "No, I want to hear what he has to say."
That happens a lot. Where disciples like, oh no. And he's like, no, bring
Bring
forward.
them on. Bring them on.
Come on, let's go.
It's interesting how many times people who have no intention of actually learning or receiving Jesus' teachings call him teacher. Teacher, they're not going to listen to what he has to say.
Or rabbi. Well, that's the same thing.
Yeah. All right, let's read verses 18 through 27. Some Sadducees, who say that there is no resurrection, came to Jesus and began questioning him, saying, "Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves behind a wife and leaves no child, his brother should marry the wife and raise up children to be his brother. There were 7 brothers, and the first took a wife and died, leaving no children. The second one married her and died, leaving behind no children, and the third likewise. And so all 7 left no children, and last of all the woman died also. And the resurrection, when they rise again, which one's wife will she be? For all 7 had married her." Jesus said to them, Is this not the reason you are mistaken, that you do not understand the scriptures or the power of God? For when they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. But regarding the fact that the dead rise again, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the passage about the burning bush, how God spoke to him, saying, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. You are greatly mistaken. So why did the Sadducees question Jesus about the resurrection?
Well, they didn't believe in it.
Right, they did not believe in life after death because they believed the laws of Moses had no direct teachings of life after death. And then in verses 26 to 27, Jesus quoted Exodus chapter 3, verse 6. And when in this verse, God spoke of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as if that they were still alive. And that basically was and even though they were dead for years at that point, that was basically proving to the Sadducees that there is life after death. He didn't say, when they were alive, I was the God, I am the God.
Were the Sadducees the ones that didn't believe in the afterlife?
Yes. Were spirits. And they were actually, a lot of them were Pharisees.
So they just
So
had
what do you
it
think
wrong
about-
from the get-go.
What about the woman that had 7 wives? Or 7 husbands?
So, yeah.
7 husbands.
She lived a long life, I tell you what.
Yeah, but what about those brothers?
She killed 7 of them.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
She married them for their money now.
I'd be cautious.
They never thought to think that she was barren and didn't have children now, that it was,
It was
Yeah.
a law.
yeah.
I don't know how the Sadducees missed that. It's just, yeah, okay.
No, I've heard the question raised from this, if everybody's gonna be like angels in heaven, who are we gonna know? Or are we going to know? You know, am I gonna know my mom and dad when I get to heaven? Or are we all just angels in heaven and we're there? I've heard the question asked that way.
Well,
Very
there's a
interesting
scripture
question.
someplace that says will be known
As we are there.
known.
But-
Which means we will know other people,
But that says
but the
they're not
physical
gonna know.
relationships here won't be there.
Right. So I would think you would know.
Relationship- So you don't think that the relationship will be known, but we will know people? That,
I would just assume that, yeah, you
What do
would
you
know
think?
people, but
Procreate anymore.
no,
I think that's the point here.
okay.
What'd you say?
There won't be a need to reproduce, to procreate anymore. So I think that's the point of marriage and the institution is to bring on the next generation. That's God's
That
will.
would be necessary.
Yeah. That's what I think.
That makes sense.
yeah.
But the rich man and Lazarus makes it, I don't think we're told that's a parable. I think that's probably a real story. So I think that would show that not only we're aware of who's there, but I think we're also aware of who's left behind.
No, but that would bring sadness. I mean, there won't be any sadness.
Well, it says
Well, you
that
wouldn't have
God would
any
wipe the tears
emotion.
away from every eye.
You
and
could,
eye.
other than happiness.
Be there.
Yeah.
No sorrow, no tears, no pain, no death,
No doubt.
no sickness.
So if we know a loved one didn't make it and they're in hell, then that would make us sad, and we won't know that because there won't be sadness.
That's only if you're thinking this from a worldly point of view, though.
Yeah, you're not gonna have your
It won't be.
Don't
human brain.
will
You know, you have
be
your
the
soul.
divine judge, and so I think that will bring satisfaction at the end, knowing that God, the righteous supreme judge, has finalized everything.
Yeah, that's always been a question about in heaven and not seeing your loved ones there or recognizing them. And this passage about marriage, when we see obituaries, we see like together again, and I'm thinking they err in not knowing the scriptures, because, you know, are they? Do they know each other? Or will we know each other? I think God's gonna take care of all that. I really do. Scriptures don't say how he's gonna do it, but he'll do something because these mortal bodies will be incorruptible and we'll be serving and praising him. So, I think he'll take care of it. That's called trust.
Good point.
If he wanted us to know, he'd let us know. So I could Deuteronomy 29:29.
Alright, let's get to 28 through 37. One of the scribes came and heard them arguing, and recognizing that he had answered them well, and asked them, "What commandment is the foremost of all?" Jesus answered, "The foremost is, Hear, O Israel, that Lord our God is one Lord, and ye shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second one is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." The scribe said to him, "Right, teacher, you have truly stated that he is one, and there is no one else beside him. And to love him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, and with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as himself is much more than all burnt offerings and sacrifices." When Jesus saw that he had answered intelligently, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." And after that, no one would venture to ask him any more questions. And Jesus began to say as he taught in the temple, "How is it the scribes say that the Christ is the son of David? David himself said in the Holy Spirit, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies beneath your feet.' David himself calls him Lord, so in what sense is he his son?" and a large crowd enjoyed listening to him. So I found this interesting. My study Bible said at this time the Jews were trying to follow possibly over 600 laws. I'm sure some of them were man-made, one handful, but they would fight over what they felt were major or minor laws. And Jesus here summarized God's laws in just a couple verses. The man who asked Jesus the question opened his heart and mind and accepted the truth. The Old Testament leads to Christ. The hardest part for any Jew at that time was then having faith in Jesus, taking that next step. In verses 35 through 37, Jesus quoted Psalms 110, verse 1, to show that David considered the Messiah to be his Lord, not just his son, and that Jesus would be more than a descendant, but God in human form. Jesus is really in the zone here with all these questions being thrown at him. But before we finish up, anybody else have anything to add to what we just read?
I just wanted to back up there on verse 29. The Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one of that down through 30, 29, 30, is called the Shema. And I don't know if any of you have heard of Ray Vanderlaan, but he is a man who studied deeply immersed into Jewish history. He's from Holland, Michigan, I believe, and has made many trips over there and has just really learned their culture and everything. And he did seminars all over the place. I got to go to a couple of them. And every session started with the Shema. We would have to stand and recite the Shema. Hear, O Israel, Lord your God is one. You know, it was really cool, and it made you realize what the Jews really, how they really immersed themselves into their beliefs and the sayings and just so much of it. And it was just really, neat.
I don't know if the Sadducees and the Pharisees were two distinct groups during the time of the prophets, or if they developed during that about 400 years of silence.
That's when they did.
It's amazing to me that within a relatively short time, you had a group of people who did not believe in the resurrection of the dead. And the church today has to be very careful, I think, of not being ignorant and being in the Word. And, I was thinking even with our recent study of the Holy Spirit, we have so many different groups in the church that believe this and believe that and on and on and on, that we have splintered ourselves to the point where churches of Christ are actively telling one another that you're condemned if you don't believe the same way that they do. And so we have to be in the Word and studying so that we are more united, I think, because we certainly don't want to end up like these group of people where we find ourselves with such a strange point of view, when the scripture clearly teaches another thing. And I think it's baffling that they came to that conclusion. I know that the Old Testament does not seem to speak directly to resurrection and stuff, but it is very much implied through principle that they died and they were not ceased to exist.
Well, even with in the Old Testament, Elijah raising people from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
So we see those miracles, but it's interesting to note how everything from Genesis all the way up to Matthew points to Christ.
Yeah.
And then everything from the New Testament points back to Christ. As far as the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the intertestament history is very interesting with what's going on, not only in the world, but in that culture. And the Apocrypha books that are not part of the biblical canon deal with that history. That's why they're not canonized, because they don't consider them inspired, because it's history. You know, you have with what's going on with the Old Testament. You have the Persians, who were the ruler of the world at that time, and then after that, you don't hear anything. But the Greeks took over, and then after the Greeks, it was the Romans, and so. And that's what's happening. And then you have the Maccabean revolt. And I'm thinking maybe these two groups started about that time. I'm not sure how long the Pharisees and the Sadducees were in existence, but I know at the fall of Jerusalem, they were no more. But yeah, it is a very interesting study. And the apostles did convert some of the Pharisees and probably some of the Sadducees.
But God didn't establish the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
No, he did not.
They came about
Right.
through men's meetings.
Alright, let's finish the chapter. In his teaching, he was saying, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes, and like respectful greetings in the marketplaces, and chief seats in synagogues, and places of honor at banquets, who devour widows' houses, and for appearance's sake offer long prayers. These will receive greater condemnation." And he sat down opposite the treasury and began observing how the people were putting money into the treasury. And many rich people were putting in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which amount to 1 cent. Calling his disciples to him, he said to them, "Truly I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the contributors to the treasury. For they all put in out of their surplus, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she owned, all that she had to live on." So, the scribes, Jesus was warning the disciples about the scribes. Scribes would take advantage of kindness. They would make a great impression and then cheat the poor out of the very little they had and take advantage of the rich. They were con artists, basically, is what Jesus is saying here. Well, at least how I feel. And then that's not. I could be wrong. That's just how I got what I got from it. And then Jesus sees this poor woman who gave very little she had in the collection box. What was the significance of this story, and how can we apply it to us today? Either part. This is 2 different sections, technically, so.
The widow should have been a recipient of the proceeds that were collected.
But she was one giving up all she had.
What was the point of the giving? Was it for,
To care for the orphans and the widow.
or was it for
In
appearances?
the temple.
Was it, look at me?
What, the widow?
No.
No, the other guys?
Yeah, put in all kinds of money and walk around with the robes on, and it's like, it wasn't, look at me, look how much money I can
Well,
put in.
you know, he said they gave out of their abundance, and our command is to give as we have been prospered. And he leaves it up to us. But see, back then it was tithing.
When I think of this story, I think about our giving and stuff like that, and I've not been in arguments, but I've seen arguments where Christians will say, "Where's your 10%? Where's your 10%?" You know, in Old Testament they do mention 10%. Leviticus chapter 27 verse 30, Numbers chapter 18 verse 26, Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 22, and 2 Chronicles chapter 31 verse 5. But that's not what I'm getting here. Do we need to have a set amount for giving? Or are all gifts acceptable to God when given out of gratitude and generosity?
Is the point really about the tithe, or is it about love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, where the poor widow did by giving everything that she had? Was it really about the money?
I
or
think
was
it's
it,
here.
Right.
It's right here. Yeah.
God appreciates all gifts, big or small, as long as it's coming from the right place.
And we have to ask ourselves the question, how much am I gonna keep for myself?
I mean, and also it comes to, where your heart is at. I just feel like that's a very important thing. Where is your heart at? It's like, I mean, yes, living on a budget and everything like that is hard. And I bet, I know a lot of people would probably be like, you know what? I'm doing what I can. But, but it's not up for us to judge, if we put it on ourselves to be like, is this enough? Is this enough? Is this enough? Or like, well, I'm going to put this little aside here for the church, and then I think it's up to God to decide, the judgment on our giving.
What?
Yeah, Terry.
You know me.
I better leave.
You gotta figure out what is he worth to you when you start giving. What did he do for you?
Everything.
You can't, you're not getting, you're not gonna earn nothing, I understand that.
Right.
But where's your heart at when it comes to that?
Exactly right, Terry.
And we wouldn't be here, we all know that. He created us, we owe him everything.
Right. You're exactly right.
One question. Final thoughts.
Final thought, no time. Next week, chapter 23. 13, not 23.
My one question, the greatest command, isn't that a challenge?